The point I always make is you Google anything, academic or otherwise, where you're going to land. It's not going to be on your seminal research paper, it's going to be Wikipedia.
Hello there, I'm Sarah McCluskey, and this is Research Adjacent. Each episode, I talk to amazing research adjacent professionals about what they do and why it makes a difference. Keep listening to find out why we think the research adjacent space is where the real magic happens. This week I'm talking to Nick Sheppard. Nick is an open research advisor at the University of Leeds. There he helps researchers to make their publications and data more easily accessible. And one way he does that is as a champion for Wikipedia and other Wikimedia databases. In fact, he is so enthusiastic about the project that he was named UK Wikimedian of the Year last year in 2023. The award announcement says Nick has advocated for Wikimedia projects within Leeds and in the university sector like few people ever have, and he's really taken on the values of the Wikimedia movement, not just in his professional life. Well done, Nick! He also co-hosts the Research Culture Uncovered podcast, taking the lead on, you guessed it, open research, and you'll find links to a couple of his favourite episodes in the show notes. For now though, listen on to hear about his pet Wikipedia page, advice for anyone interested in a similar career, and why he would use his research adjacent magic wand to stop time. Welcome along, Nick. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I wonder if we could begin our conversation by hearing a little bit about what it is that you do. What's your current role?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Sarah, and thanks for inviting me on. Happy to be here. So, yeah, I'm Nick Sheppard. I'm Open Research Advisor at the University of Leeds. Now, when we were talking on LinkedIn, I think you suggested you'd never met an Open Research Advisor before.
No, this is a new job title to me.
And I'm not sure there's any or many or even any with the same job title, but essentially my role is around openness throughout the research life cycle. So I'm based in the library in research services at the University of Leeds. Got a background in open access, so perhaps people will be perhaps more familiar with open access to research publications. So you'll see lots of job titles around that, open access support, scholarly comm support, open research specialist is another one. We'll perhaps get on to talk about the fact that, this is an area that's developing, I think, in libraries. But essentially my role is advocacy around open research. So that includes open access, open data, open and fair data. Not all data can be open. Perhaps we'll get onto that as well. That's one of the challenges certainly we face. Disseminating research, public engagement, everything to do with the openness of research throughout the research life cycle. Reproducibility, that's a huge part of it. So making sure that data is available under a research publication to enable research to be reproduced and replicated, that kind of thing. So yeah, everything to do with the research life cycle.
Yeah, so all very important stuff, but this is quite, as I say, not many people with your job title. It's sort of evolved out of open access. So is this kind of a new area or just one that's really expanding and developing and changing right now?
I think it is sort of developing and expanding. I mean, that's the thing we keep sort of saying that, open research isn't new. I think there's a lot more emphasis on it now over the past few years, and a lot of funders are explicitly acknowledging open research. I mean, even the language is not necessarily straightforward. I mean, we talk about open research. Some places talk about open science. We tend to use open research, certainly at Leeds, and I think in the sector in the UK more generally, to be more inclusive of the humanities. I mean, that's another challenge that we'll perhaps come on to, is the fact that open practice varies so much across different disciplines. So yeah, it is a growing area, and as I say, you'll see different job titles around, some including open research, some around open science, in library land anyway, and increasingly open access, and these roles are sort of bleeding into one another and developing, and there is a lot of work to do, I think, as a sector, trying to make sure people have got the right sort of skills, knowledge and experience to support this type of thing in libraries. So yeah, it is certainly grown out of open access, I think, but and research data. But it's it's definitely developing quite rapidly over the past few years.
And so you said there that you'd kind of had a background in open access already, but I'm guessing your career journey goes back even beyond that. What's been your route into this work?
Well, now you're asking. I mean, I'll be giving my age away, but I started working at what was then Leeds Metropolitan University, now Leeds Beckett, on in open access in 2007, I think, and then I was already in my early 30s. I never knew quite what I wanted to do in terms of a career. I did a degree in English literature, which isn't the most vocational of degrees. Didn't really know after that what I wanted to do, so I wandered around. I did a bit of temping. I worked in bookshops. Thought about teaching. I taught English as a foreign language in Lithuania, in Vilnius, for a bit, only for 6 months. I worked in mental health for a long time. So yeah, all sorts of different things, and not quite sure what to do. So it wasn't until I sort of got into my 30s and started working initially actually in the library at Salford University as an information assistant. Before I started working into open access, and there was a lot going on in that space at the time. So it was sort of just accidental, really, that I ended up working in open access around in the 2010s. Is that what we call them now?
Probably something like that, yeah. Yeah, and then so from open access, you've just sort of gradually taken on responsibility as things have changed.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, as I say, I'm trying to think of some of the other job titles I've had that you will still see around. So back at that time, there was a lot of investment in developing repositories, open access repositories. So that was my initial post, which was I think it was his part-time role at Leeds Metropolitan, as it was, it's now Leeds Beckett, to set up an institutional repository at Leeds Met, as was, and as a different type of institution than, say, Leeds, where I am now, the University of Leeds. There was more of a teaching focus, perhaps, so looking at open educational resources as well, and open education. Now that's come back around full circle as well. We'll talk about that perhaps in a bit more detail. So I had a relatively technical job, I suppose, at that time, actually, liaising with vendors of software and trying to figure out what software to use, and et cetera, setting up from scratch, really, that system at Leeds Met at the time. I was there about 9 years. I only came to Leeds University in 2016 to join the research data management team. So that was a bit of a shift. That was more focused on research data, moving on from open access. And then since then, things have developed across the sector to be more holistic, I suppose, around open research. So bringing together the open access side and research data side, increasing the reproducibility and all that kind of stuff as well. It's looking back, it seems there's quite a narrative there, but certainly didn't feel like that at the time. Those things have developed over the past, what is it now, 16, 17 years that I've been working in this area.
Yeah, these things always look clearer looking back than they do looking forwards, don't they? Yeah. Well, I'm sure in that time and all the things you worked on, there are some projects you've been involved with that you're really proud of. I wonder if maybe there's a few things you'd like to tell us about.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting just talking to you now, and I'm thinking back to that first role in setting up the repository at Leeds Met, still going with the same software, actually, although we did have a few false starts with software way back then. So just, getting that off the ground, and I was talking to colleagues, because I know colleagues that are still working there now, and I think there's going on for, I can't remember what the number was now, but it was in the sort of 10,000 records in that repository with, and the very first record is one of my papers that I'd uploaded when I was testing the system, so I suppose I'm proud that that's there. More recently, I mean, yeah, like you say, it's difficult to remember all the different projects I've been involved with, but more recently, the thing that I'm really sort of driving me at the moment, and that I'm working a lot on, is promoting Wikimedia in universities, and was actually awarded or recognised last year as UK Wikimedian of the Year, which was a bit of a surprise. So
congratulations!
Proud of that, and obviously we've already been talking just before we started recording a little bit about Wikipedia, which is one part of Wikimedia, but certainly that's an area that I'm particularly interested in. And I always use a quote from Melissa. What's she called? Sorry, I've got it written down here. So Melissa Hyton. So she's at the University of Edinburgh. She was actually at the time here at the University of Leeds, I believe, before my time. There's a quote I like to use from her where she sort of says, universities really can't afford not to have a Wikimedian in residence these days. It still surprises me how few do. And that's certainly something that I've been working hard to try and address across the sector. And we're making a bit of progress that in getting people to think about how Wikimedia can be used in the academy.
I wonder if you could tell us a bit more about that, because I think, as you say, this is something that there's huge potential there, but I think very few universities or researchers have really got their head around the potential of Wikimedia.
Yeah, no, like it's very, very true. And I mean, the point I make, I mean, for a start, people might not even be aware that Wikimedia is much more than Wikipedia. I mean, everybody I think is familiar with Wikipedia, you know, as the world's biggest sort of encyclopedia that anybody can edit, I think is their tagline. But that's actually just one of, I think actually there's a new project come online recently, but I've also said one of 16 interconnected projects. So there's things like Wikimedia Commons, which is an open access repository essentially of media files. Wikidata is a fascinating tool as well of sort of a linked data database that links that you can use in quite interesting ways. I mean, you know, you need a week to sort of explore different areas of it. But on Wikipedia in particular, the point I always make to academic colleagues, for example, is you Google anything, you know, pretty much anything, academic or otherwise, where you're going to land. It's not going to be on your seminal research paper. It's going to be Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Which may or may not be accurate.
Yeah.
Again, it's actually more controlled than people quite realize. I mean, I've learned, I mean, I'm still on the learning curve myself, but every Wikipedia page has a rating in terms of how it's scored against the content assessment scale. And it's just a really powerful way to learn for a start and to teach. You can cite research on it, whether it's your own or others. Have to be a little aware of conflict of interest. I mean, that's an area, but again, it's all about transparency and being able to include your own research is absolutely fine. Lots of stuff around representation and knowledge equity. So I've been doing a lot of work in that area as well. So for example, due to structural biases, etc., there's far less information about say women scientists than compared to male scientists on Wikipedia, for all sorts of reasons, including structural and the type of people that are actually editing Wikipedia. So I think it's gone up now to 19% of biographies on Wikipedia are about women compared to 81% about men. So there's a really powerful initiative called Women in Red, which addresses that, and they have editathons, as they're called, to actually write articles about women scientists or women in different areas, for example. Geographical biases, because again, a lot of editors of Wikipedia tend to be perhaps white middle class Europeans or North Americans, and they're writing about computer games or this, that, and the other, whereas they won't be writing about other aspects that you need a broader representation of editors. So I'm very interested in sort of encouraging a wider range of people to actually contribute to the encyclopedia as well.
Yeah, and even doing things like translating articles can be really helpful for that as well, can't it? People who can speak other languages.
Well, that's right. And again, so Wikipedia, for example, is in, I think, is it 326 languages? And they're all independent. They've all got their own communities, etc. Now, of course, English Wikipedia is the biggest. It's got the biggest editor base. But again, in terms of knowledge equity, we've done some work with a Wikimedia Champions project here, for example, where we were translating Wikipedia articles into other languages, because that was with postgraduate students who had speakers of other languages. I think, I had a Spanish speaker, a colleague from India who spoke a language called Kannada, which I hadn't even heard of before. There's a Wikipedia in that language, so she was doing some work in that language as well. So it's just, it's so, one of the problems is actually it's that vast. You can do that many different things, and there's so much potential for teaching and learning as well as research dissemination. So it's difficult to sort of get a handle on it, and that's why you need what they call a Wikimedian in residence, really, to try and
help navigate that. And you've got a particular kind of pet page, haven't you, on Wikipedia? Would you like to tell us about that?
Yeah, well, that's where it's all started. So whenever I always tell people about Wilson Armistead, and there's no reason anybody should have necessarily heard of Wilson Armistead, but it's a good example where I came across him in a research paper by a colleague here, Professor Bridget Bennett, had written a research paper. So just in the course of my work, I'd seen this article which talked about Wilson Armistead, who was an anti-slavery abolitionist in Leeds in the 19th century, and actually lived in a house that's now part of the University of Leeds campus. And he set up or founded something called the Leeds Anti-Slavery Society, and there was a lot of abolitionist activity at the time. And it's just a fascinating story that I'd never heard of. So there were Ellen and William Craft, who are better known. They were escaped fugitive slaves from the southern United States in the 1850, I think. And they escaped bondage to slavery in the southern United States, Georgia, I think, and travelled up to New York. And this was before the American Civil War, of course. Now, I'm no historian, so I've learned all this by just virtue of actually, editing the page and following links, etc. And then the law changed, and they could send bounty hunters to actually retrieve these slaves and bring them to the plantation or whatever. So they came over to England, and they were actually staying with Wilson Armistead in Leeds on the night of the census in 1851. So he recorded them on the census as fugitive slaves, which then became part of the historical record. So I just thought it was a fascinating story. Never heard of Wilson Armistead. There was, these archives at the University of Leeds about him. There's this research paper, etc., which I used as a citation for the article, and wrote a Wikipedia article, which is now quite well researched. Others obviously have contributed to it as well. So I've been working on that ever since, really, and it's quite an interesting article now. There's lots of information there. It's obviously a lot more visible. It makes the research underneath that, or the archives, etc., more visible as well. So it's just a really nice example of open knowledge and how it can take it to a much broader audience than, perhaps quite specialised research paper sat in a journal somewhere that not that many people perhaps will read, and now hopefully more will do so because they'll follow that link onto the paper from the Wikipedia page.
Oh, brilliant. What a great story. Well, I'll make sure I get a link for that and put it in the show notes. Anybody who's interested can go and have a look.
As I say, he's a local Leeds hero that deserves to be better known. So, now he is, by virtue of putting him on the global commons, as you might term it, in terms of making this available to more.
Excellent. Excellent. Oh, no, that's really nice to have a really concrete example as well of the way that, something that, local history, local relevance, uncovering that research, telling that story, getting it out into the world and sharing that information in a way that it wouldn't have been seen otherwise.
Well, that's right. And, and again, that's one of the interesting things about, again, the potential of Wikipedia, because obviously that's a historical example, but another example is a postgraduate on our Wikimedia Champions project developed a infographic about the process of cryogenic electron microscopy, which is not something I know anything about, which we've now translated into about 9 languages, I think, and that's on Wikimedia Commons, which is this repository, and then that's been used on multiple Wikipedia pages to illustrate cryogenic electron microscopy in different languages, for example. So again, it's a really powerful way of just getting that into the global commons and being used by other people.
Excellent. Oh, fantastic examples. So I'm sure that in this journey, although you've had these things that have worked out well, there have been some challenges along the way. So what sorts of things have been the biggest hurdles?
Well, thinking back to when I started, I suppose, universities, perhaps less so now. There's a lot of work going on in the sector, but they are very big, complex, bureaucratic organisations, quite hierarchical sometimes. And certainly as someone coming into the academy, from a totally different area. I've been working, as I say, in mental health prior to coming into university. So a bit of imposter syndrome, I guess. That bureaucracy and complexity, I mean, you need to be in the sector and a particular institution for years, really, before you know how it works and how everything fits together and who to talk to, and it can be a bit frustrating actually trying to get anything done
Yeah.
sometimes, because they're big, sort of slow moving and, as I say, bureaucratic organisations. So that's certainly a challenge. I mean, on a personal level, a lot of anxiety for me. Just presentations wasn't something I'd done
Mm.
much of, and I found that really, really daunting at first. Standing up in front of professors or researchers or whatever, and talking to them about open access.
And especially in the early days of open access, there was quite a lot of resistance, wasn't
Yeah,
there?
yeah. And now perhaps with open research and trying to change the way people do their research and trying to communicate that. But yeah, certainly in the I mean, I always tell a story early on where I was trying to explain to an academic colleague of the principles of open access and why he should upload what we call his accepted manuscript to the repository. And he was quite foul-mouthed, actually. I remember he was swearing a lot, as if we
Oh
were
dear.
and he sort of held his head in his hands, and I said, "I just can't believe but this is ridiculous." He wasn't happy anyway. But he was an economist, I think, and we got talking about his research. And then he got carried away. Then he was showing me pictures and he was explaining what he was working on, and I can't remember, it's years ago. And that was sort of an end. Then he sort of, we developed a bit of a rapport, and he was sort of interested in explaining his research to me. And I said, then, to be honest, I made a bit of a rock off my own back because I ended up doing a lot of his uploading for him. But again, it's just trying to get people on side and sort of understanding what the benefits are, because by and large, researchers want people to know what they're doing,
Yes,
and
to read their work.
communicate
Yeah.
their research,
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting, but I imagine it must have been tough at times. And so you also mentioned there, I think earlier on in the conversation, that some of the different challenges there are around different disciplines with open research as well.
Yeah, well, again, that's a huge challenge generally, and also for a central service like the library. And I often say, I've got a bachelor's degree in English, which basically means I can read. And when you're trying to support, of course, a big research-intensive university, whether it can be anything from physics to chemistry to French history or anything and everything. And the issues vary potentially quite significantly across different disciplines, and I can't hope to know, the ins and outs of every area. So just in terms of quantitative research or qualitative research, social sciences versus STEM subjects, the issues are potentially very different. So we at Leeds in particular and across the sector, there's been a lot of work on trying to understand what the different issues are. So for example, in social science or qualitative research, it can be very difficult to make sure you've got the right consent to share data derived from human beings, which obviously isn't going to be the same issue for just pure sort of STEM-based data.
Yeah.
Even what data is, the word data is perhaps loaded for STEM in a way that's, humanity scholars might not even think of what they do as data in the same way. So yeah, there's lots of challenges around that, both for us understanding it and supporting it as a service and trying to convey the essential principles and trying to understand how that actually relates to a specific discipline.
Yeah, I can imagine. But I imagine as time goes on, we'll start to figure these things out and it become more established.
Well, that's right, and also I think there's a lot of potential for actually cross-disciplinary work, and things that do work across different disciplines. Then it's only by bringing together, and that collaboration's a huge part of what it's all about. I think open research and learning from each other. whether that's within a university and whether it's the library and other professional services with different academic departments or different disciplines. Really trying to benefit and
collaboration's definitely the way forward. Yeah, excellent. Oh, thank you. So One question I do like to ask all of my guests is, if you had a magic wand and an unlimited budget, what would you change about the world that you work in?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I was thinking about this, and I suppose it's infrastructure that works. I mean,
Yeah.
that might sound, it's just really difficult to manage data in a university, within the environment that we're working with, GDPR and all the complexities around that, and qualitative data is already mentioned, and cloud services and NHS data. We work with the Leeds teaching hospitals and all the governance that goes around that and the infrastructure. So yeah, if I had a magic wand, certainly that would be the thing to fix, but that's a heck of a spell that would need.
I was going to say you need a pretty impressive magic wand, I think, to tease all that out. But I can also see why the idea of just, can't it just all work? Just all,
So you'd it's sort of a job for I don't know, a warlock or Merlin or something.
Yeah, definitely need some superpowers to sort that one out. But I think a worthy aim though. So yeah.
But I suppose as well that might be a slightly easier job actually, is to stop time. And just having more time and being able to, because there's that much to read and to learn and to
stop time long enough for us to catch up, get everything uploaded that we've already got. Yeah.
And that's probably, perhaps, as I say, an easier spell than actually fixing the governance and bureaucracy of the higher education sector. So
maybe we need one of those. What was it in Harry Potter where that Hermione had, so she could go to lots of different subjects all at the same time? Yeah, one of them. That'd be good. So, if anybody listening is interested in working in a similar role to do with open research, what advice would you give them?
Well, as I was sort of saying at the beginning, my past's been rather meandering. I suppose, like many things, you don't always find what you want to do in the short term, I suppose. So there's a lot more guidance available these days than when I started. I've actually been working recently with colleagues on a series of primers, as they're called, for UKRN. That's the UK Reproducibility Network. So there's actually 3 primers that were released towards the end of last year, working in open access, working in research data management, and working in open research. So they sort of cover some of the areas, but essentially it's such a wide area and it could be any range of things, but really the main thing is sort of interest in research and wanting to work with people, being able to negotiate and sort of collaborate with people is the main thing. But it's a really satisfying area to work in, so I'd encourage people to think about it.
It sounds like there would be really useful resources, so we'll get some links to them and include them as well. Brilliant. Well, it just remains really, Nick, to say thank you very much for taking the time to come along and have a chat. If people want to connect with you, where's the best place to find you? You have got your own podcast.
Well, it's not my podcast. We do have the Research Culture Uncovered podcast, which I've been working on with colleagues here at Leeds from Organisational Development and Professional Learning, as we call them, OD and PL. There's that. I am still on Twitter or X or whatever it's called, but I'm not sure.
If anybody else is.
The culture's shifted a little, should we say? But I'm still on there, both as personally and for my university work, and LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn as well. So
we'll get
and always keen to talk to people and learn from others and collaborate. As I say,
fantastic.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah, and share the word about Wikimedia perhaps to some more people.
Yeah. Well, I'm Wikimedia. I'm on Wikipedia as well, of course. So every user has a user page on Wikipedia. So that's another place you can find me. I'm OA Nick, I think, on there.
Okay, well, we shall get all of those links and put them in the show notes. But, so thank you so much for coming along and having a chat.
No, thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to Research Adjacent. If you're listening in a podcast app, please check you're subscribed and then use the links under the episode to find full show notes and to follow the podcast on LinkedIn, Twitter or Instagram. Also, make sure that you're subscribed to the Research Adjacent Roundup newsletter. You can also find all the links and other episodes at www.researchadjacent.com. Research Adjacent is presented and produced by Sarah McCluskey, and you, yes you, get a big gold star for listening right to the end. See you next time.